On any major construction project, there's one role that holds an incredible amount of responsibility and, well, power, and that's the engineer. Today, we're diving deep into that specific role, all through the lens of the FIDIC 2017 Red Book, a document that really changed the game for construction contracts.
So let me ask you this. When you picture a big construction site, who do you think is really running the show? The employer with the money? The contractor doing the work? You might actually be surprised to hear that under the latest FIDIC rules, a really strong case can be made for the engineer. And in this explainer, we're going to show you exactly why. All right, here's our game plan. We'll start with how the engineer gets appointed in the first place. Then we'll get into their expanded authority and how that works on site with delegation. After that, the big one, the whole process for agreements and determinations. And finally, we'll see what happens when disputes pop up. Okay, Section 1, the appointed engineer. You know, everything has to start somewhere, and for the engineer, it starts right here. Before any power can be used, they have to be formally appointed. And how that happens? Well, it has huge consequences for the entire project. So, Subclause 3.1 officially defines the engineer as the person or company picked by the employer to run the contract. And look, this isn't just a suggestion, it's a core duty for the employer. It's also really important to know that even if a big firm is appointed, they can't just be a faceless entity. A specific, named person has to be designated to handle the engineer's duties. That way, there's clear accountability from day one. Now, how this appointment goes down really matters. Ideally, the engineer is named right there in the tender documents. Why? Because it lets the contractor check them out and assess any potential risks. Appointing them after the tender, not so great. And you can run into a real problem if you split the job. Using one engineer for design and another for supervision on site, a ton of valuable background info can just get lost in that handover. Section 2, Authority and Independence. All right, now we're getting to the absolute heart of the 2017 update. This wasn't some minor tweak. It was a fundamental shift in the balance of power. It gave the engineer way more authority and, critically, independence. I mean, the change between the old and new editions is pretty dramatic. Before, the employer kind of held the purse strings, and the engineer often had to go get their approval for acting on claims or changes. But the 2017 edition, it completely breaks those chains, empowering the engineer to act with real, genuine independence. And this right here, this quote is the absolute game changer. It makes it crystal clear. When it comes to the formal process of an agreement or a determination, the engineer acts alone. They are explicitly told they can make a fair decision without needing a sign-off from the employer. Section 3, On-Site Delegation. So we've established the engineer's got all this authority, but how does that actually translate to the day-to-day chaos of a busy construction site? Well, that's where delegation comes in. The contract sets up a really clear chain of command. The main engineer might not be on site every single day, but their representative will be. This person lives on site full-time and has the authority to act for the engineer. And below them, other assistants can be appointed for specific jobs, but the contract is clear they have to be qualified and competent to do the work. But here's the line in the sand. While a lot of duties can be passed down, that ultimate authority, the power to make a formal determination under Subclause 3.7, cannot be delegated. Nope. That power stays with the engineer and the engineer alone. It's one responsibility that just can't be handed off. The contract also has this really rigid, time-sensitive process for dealing with potential variations. If a contractor thinks an instruction is going to cost more money or time, they have to raise a flag by giving a formal notice. And that's when the clock starts ticking for the engineer, who has just 7 days to respond. This tight deadline is all about forcing clarity. If the engineer doesn't reply in time, the instruction just disappears. It protects the contractor from any vague orders. Section 4, the agreement or determination path. This brings us to what is, without a doubt, the most critical and complex part of the engineer's job, the formal process for sorting out claims, all laid out in the famous Subclause 3.7. Now, don't worry if this next part seems a little dense. The official guide to the contract itself straight up admits that this clause is tough to get your head around on the first go. So let's break it down together, step by step. Okay, so this flowchart, this is basically our roadmap. Think of it like that. It lays out every single step and decision point, from the moment a claim is filed all the way to a final resolution. We're going to follow this path together. So it all kicks off when one party submits a notice of claim. From that moment, they have 84 days to submit a fully detailed version. The engineer's first job is to get both the employer and the contractor in a room and really push them to agree. If they just can't get there, and only then, the engineer steps in to make what the contract calls a fair determination. After the engineer makes their call, the path splits into three. The best case scenario, obviously, is that both sides accept it and you have a binding agreement. But the determination can also be completely rejected, or even just partly rejected, and that is what triggers the next phase of a dispute.
Section 5. Disputes and project meetings. And that brings us to our final leg. What actually happens when people formally disagree, and how regular meetings are supposed to keep things from spiraling out of control in the first place.
See, you can't just ignore a decision you don't like. You have to formally challenge it by issuing what's called a Notice of Dissatisfaction, or an NOD for short. And this isn't just a simple thumbs down. You have to spell out exactly why you disagree, which sets the stage for any future arguments. And you have got to be quick about it. A Notice of Dissatisfaction has to be sent within exactly 28 days of getting the engineer's determination. This is a hard deadline, no extensions, because if you do nothing, the consequences are huge. If neither side issues an NOD within that 28-day window, the engineer's determination automatically becomes final and legally binding. Poof! The chance to argue is gone. Of course, the real goal is to avoid these formal fights altogether, which is why the contract is so big on communication. It suggests breaking up big meetings into smaller, focused sessions on technical and administrative stuff, all chaired by the engineer. And everything has to be written down. The system's also flexible enough to let you bring in outsiders, like the local utility company, to solve specific problems before they blow up. And all of this leaves us with one big, lingering question. The FIDC 2017 contract gives the engineer more power than ever, all in the name of getting fair and independent decisions. But is giving one person all this authority actually prevent disputes? Or does it just change their focus, centralizing every conflict around a single, powerful decision maker? It's a debate that's still shaping the entire industry.